and breaking the wall in the process. He enters the room where the bald person went and throws him aside. The bald person pleads for mercy, and Javier mentions he has a question. He puts his foot on the person's leg, breaking it, causing him to cry out in pain. Javier warns that if there's even a moment's hesitation in the reply, the other leg will suffer the same fate. He asks about Cannavaro's schemes in this place. The bald person responds that he doesn't know the details, he's just following orders as an undertaker hired by Mr. Fall Cannavaro. He explains that he processes the corpses brought by Cannavaro through chemical means and is suddenly instructed to guard the place. Javier inquires about the source of the corpses, causing the bald person to become scared. The person explains that the corpses come from the trading post, where they send the bodies of refugees who died from illnesses. Javier remembers his plan to move his father to the trading post for treatment, feeling grateful for the potential improvement in his father's health. She expresses her thanks with a bow, and Javier thinks about the corpses, the skulls with jewels that Master Lloyd Frontera discovered, and all the undead he has cut down. Javier questions whether the bald person found it strange that the trading post kept sending corpses here. He declares the person an accomplice, breaking the person's other leg. Javier moves quickly, anticipating the discovery of their underground room. He considers the urgency of informing Master Lloyd and devising a countermeasure against their actions. After a while, Javier arrives home and calls Master Lloyd, realizing he has no time to waste searching for him. He takes his sword and quickly heads out, determining that he must make a decision and take action. He decides to attack Cannavaro by himself, thinking about Cannavaro and the others who discuss things he couldn't understand, speculating that they were all from the trading post. Believing the trading post to be their base, he breaks a window to enter and looks around, finding it empty. He concludes that the trading post, once filled with people, is now vacant, making him suspect that they have initiated some undisclosed activity. Entering a room, he encounters a black magic cloud, feeling a sudden weakness as if his strength is draining rapidly. Puzzled by the situation, he goes outside and observes a black magic cloud shield enveloping the entire city. His sword also loses its powers, and he realizes that mana is rapidly being drained from everyone. People collapse to the ground, and he worries about Master Lloyd, fearing for his safety. Soluria Namaran looks out of a window, witnessing people dying. She rushes to go outside, unsure of what is happening but determined to help. The person with a scar on their face stands outside the city, casting a magic spell and believing that the Nectanium and the spell given by Cannavaro are effective. They anticipate the descent of the Hell Knight upon the city, leading to the world becoming theirs. Despite this conviction, the person wonders about the mysterious identity of the guy involved in these events. Lloyd Frontera approached him and suggested that he ask a question. Upon looking around, he observed approximately 30 people dressed similarly to himself, and wondered if they were engaging in a ritual for rain or some other purpose. Despite this, he continued with his magic spell. Growing frustrated, Lloyd Frontera inquired why his question was being ignored. He questioned whether he was currently being treated as if he were invisible. The thought crossed his mind that he might have scared the individual, considering how unattractive he appeared. He reasoned that he mustn't move at this moment, as any slight movement of his mouth could ruin everything. As he walked away, Lloyd Frontera decided to treat him as an invisible person and determined to see how long he could feign ignorance. While attempting to strike the person with a scar using his shovel, it unexpectedly turned, resulting in a crack. Undeterred, the person with the scar smiled, prompting him to realize that the magical protection of steel cast by Cannavaro was in effect, rendering a mere shovel ineffective. Realizing the situation, he unleashed his powers, attacking with fire and causing the person with the scar to become frightened. Lloyd Frontera examines his shovel. The person with the scar considers how foolish it is, noting that the magic's defense power is absolute, and Lloyd won't even be able to scratch it. The person comments that Lloyd seems quite confident, but must be in a lot of pain at the moment. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, the person acknowledges that things are not going according to plan and emphasizes the need to remain calm. Moving his hand towards his badge, the person contemplates whether absorbing mana, as he did last time, would be effective. As he starts to absorb mana, his hand begins to burn. He questions whether Lloyd will not move or cannot move, pondering the potential consequences of the barrier if he does. Engaging in deep thought, he formulates a plan. Lloyd Frontera interrupts, stating that there's no need to reply because he intends to test it out regardless. The black magic spell begins to spread all around. Meanwhile, at Namoran Town Hall, Mr. Canavero walks into the hall, causing many people to fall to the floor unconscious. A person catches his foot and pleads for help. Mr. Canavero dismissively calls him vermin and kicks him in the mouth. He notices a statue in front of him and declares that the statue of the fallen angel will become a gate for the Hell Knight's descent. He then cuts his finger and points his blood on the statue. Simultaneously, Lloyd Frontera throws mud around and announces that preparations are complete. He digs a hole around the person with a scar and creates a makeshift table for him to stand on. The person with the scar starts sweating due to fear. Lloyd Frontera approaches, making different voices to intensify the scare tactics. The mud table breaks and he falls down, causing his mana to start exploding, and he screams no. Eventually, he becomes unconscious. Lloyd Frontera takes the badge from his shirt and reflects on how this seems to be quite a complex and elaborate spell, realizing that it backfires as soon as the user moves in such a case. He observes the surroundings, noting the palace covered with a black magic spell, and thinks nice. Meanwhile, Mr. Canavero stands near the statue, contemplating who it is. Despite insufficient mana, he must finish the summoning right away. He reads some spells. Siluria Namoran arrives and asks what on earth he is trying to do. He looks at her and considers whether a magic charm that blocks the loss of mana is the reason she can walk normally within the barrier. He employs his fire magic, hurling it towards her, and asserts that it's still useless. She, in turn, employs her powers and halts the fire using her fire magic. Growing irritated, he sees her and gathers all his fire magic power, declaring punishment of the fire god. She attacks him with fire, but he deploys a protection shield to defend himself. An explosion occurs, spreading black dust. She approaches him and demands an explanation, asking what he is attempting to do there. He responds by uttering some spells. Shocked by his actions, she inquires further. He continues by saying, "Descend upon them, Hell Knight." The statue begins to break. She looks at him in disbelief, asking if he is a Hell Knight. He takes his sword and moves to attack. Javier also arrives with his master's sword, attacking and shattering the statue. Mr. Canavero is shocked to witness this turn of events. Canavero attacks Javier, but Javier counterattacks and cuts his hand. A bright flash emanates from the statue's eye, capturing Javier's attention as an explosion ensues. Everyone takes cover to shield themselves from the statue's fragments. Siluria Namoran utilizes her skill as Earth God's shield, effectively protecting the people of her city. Javier grips his sword and prepares for another attack. Canavero, now frightened, declares that it's all over, referring to Javier as vermin. He predicts that everyone present will burn to death and have their limbs ripped apart at the hands of the Hell Knight. He laughs maniacally as a demonic hand materializes behind him, summoning a giant monster wielding a huge sword. Canavero looks at Javier and wonders what's happening. He questions the whereabouts of the Warhorse of Hell and why Javier doesn't have any legs. Javier curses, pondering whether there was not enough mana due to Namoran's barrier disappearing, and speculates if rushing the summoning in that state caused the issue. He contemplates the possibility of defeating the Hell Knight, even though it's not in its complete form. Xerixius inquires what the summoner desires. Canavero accuses the silver-haired man of daring to point his sword towards him. Xerixius charges to attack Javier with his sword, while Javier attempts to stop the onslaught. He realizes that the impact reverberates throughout all his bones, rendering the full body strengthening achieved through a mix of aura and mana useless. Xerixius forcefully pushes him back and launches another attack, but Siluria Namoran uses her skill to counter Xerixius, while Javier steps back from the ongoing assault. Xerixius questions who dares to intervene and charges Siluria Namoran. Observing this, Javier becomes infuriated, channels all his mana force, and launches a powerful attack on Xerixius just as he is about to strike Siluria Namoran. She becomes frightened and closes her eyes, and Javier successfully cuts off his head, causing him to collapse on the ground. Javier gazes at the lifeless body of Xerixius, which transforms into ashes. Canavero expresses disbelief, stating that it's impossible. Javier points his sword towards him and acknowledges Siluria, thanking her for his victory. He requests her to move everyone to a place where they can rest. She agrees, saying she'll attend to it. Arcos Frontera urges Javier to help support the others if he has any strength left and suggests moving to the Count's mansion quickly. He emphasizes the need to hurry up. Javier asserts that they will discuss the details of the incident in the palace, acknowledging that, regardless of the circumstances, he won't be able to evade execution. Canavero retorts, claiming he knows nothing and referring to Javier as a brat, asserting that he doesn't understand the significance of an existence from hell. Meanwhile, the monster reappears from the ashes, once again wielding his sword. Canavero laughs, stating that no matter how many times Javier cuts him down, it's useless because the great Hell Knight is undying. Zeuxias admits that he thought Javier was strong in their initial clash, expressing surprise at discovering his true strength. He apologizes for underestimating Javier's abilities and not paying enough attention. Identifying himself as Zeuxias, the first corps captain serving the ruler of Hell, he suggests that they now decide the true victor in this situation. Javier identifies himself as Javier Asrahan, a knight of Frontera, and declares his intention to send Zeuxias back to where he came from. They both prepare for the impending fight. Zeuxias swiftly runs and closes the distance to Javier, catching him off guard, and Javier becomes frightened unexpectedly. They engage in a battle, each attempting to defeat the other, while Zeuxias expresses his surprise and finds the situation entertaining. Zeuxias initiates an attack on Javier, who successfully blocks the assault and throws him away. Undeterred, Zeuxias charges once more to attack Javier, and they engage in repeated exchanges. Javier contemplates the situation, noting that Zeuxias' sword technique lacks finesse. Despite merely swinging his sword around, it proves challenging for Javier to dodge, prompting him to search for an opening to counterattack. In an attempt to create such an opportunity, Javier throws his dagger towards Zeuxias, who promptly catches it. Javier reflects on the limitations imposed by his injured legs, realizing that, despite various potential movements, being on the ground leaves him with only one option. Zeuxias disappears, leading Javier to ponder where he might reappear. Aware of the need to anticipate and prepare for Zeuxias' movements, Javier readies himself for the next encounter. Meanwhile, Zeuxias' sword emerges from the ground, and he resurfaces. However, Javier, having spotted him in time, counterattacks, commanding him to die. Swiftly, Zeuxias seizes Javier's leg, causing him to lose balance. Javier wonders if Zeuxias is attempting to fling him, considering using mana reinforcement, but the flowing mana from Zeuxias seems to block his own. He throws Javier to the ground, lifts him again, and repeats the action, prompting Javier to shout in pain. Zeuxias remarks that it has been enjoyable, acknowledging Javier's honorable name and expressing the intention to remember it. He raises his sword, suggesting they fight again in hell, nearly stabbing Javier. Lloyd Frontera arrives, addressing him as Skeleton Head, and commands him to stop. Lloyd informs him that, based on what he knows, the Skeleton Head must return to hell if his summoner dies. Lloyd points his shovel towards Canavero, warning him to move away from his knight on the count of 3, or he'll decapitate Canavero. He screams in fear. He contemplates the identity of the intimidating individual before him, noting the terrifying appearance and the absence of bluffing. He acknowledges the potential threat, recognizing the otherworldly feeling emanating from the mysterious figure. Zeuxias inquires about the newcomer's origin, questioning if he is from hell based on his appearance and manner of speech. Lloyd Frontera initiates a countdown, pressing his shovel against Zeuxias' neck. In response, Zeuxias unleashes a powerful magic spell, prompting Lloyd to swiftly dodge, resulting in the spell hitting Canavero instead. He remarks that as long as Canavero is still breathing, everything is acceptable. Even in the event of his death, he claims it would take only 40 minutes to perform a reverse summon, allowing him to easily devastate the city. Lloyd Frontera reflects on the failure of his strategy and contemplates his next move. Meanwhile, Javier rises once again, attempting to attack Zeuxias from behind. However, he senses his presence and hurls him away. Observing the situation, Lloyd Frontera realizes that Javier is already groggy. He shouts at Javier to fight, instructing him to stay down and emphasizing that it's an order. Lloyd calls out to Zeuxias from behind as he moves towards Javier. Javier believes that with Lloyd's arrival, victory is now possible, and he is determined to achieve it no matter what. Lloyd Frontera addresses him, verbally abusing him while utilizing his mana fire powers to launch an attack. Zeuxias, however, blocks the attack and redirects it back towards Lloyd. Reacting swiftly, Lloyd sidesteps, causing an explosion behind him. Seizing the opportunity, Zeuxias readies his sword to attack. Unexpectedly, Lloyd Frontera comes from behind and tightly grabs him. He warns Lloyd, calling him a fool, and explains the consequences of touching a being from hell. He asserts that the mana tainted with darkness will contaminate Lloyd's heart, leading to his demise. In response, Lloyd Frontera expresses his acknowledgement, deeming it quite frightening. Nevertheless, he states that he has already purified the black mana multiple times. Xerixius is perplexed, wondering about Lloyd's identity. A message window informs him that the mana flowing from the Hell Knight has temporarily strengthened his mana heart. The message continues, stating that, although he is still not a match for the Hell Knight, at this very moment, the Hell Knight won't be able to ignore him. Another message window notifies him that the special Lloyd human lock has been activated, prompting Lloyd to tighten his grip even further and laugh. Lloyd Frontera maintains his grip on Xerixius as Xerixius attempts to hit him with his face and toss him away. However, Lloyd swiftly seizes Xerixius's legs, throws him to the ground, and then tightens his hold on Xerixius's neck, laughing loudly. As Javier prepares to attack again, Xerixius questions if he needs to remember something. Observing this, Xerixius thinks that Javier has already recovered from the earlier damage and realizes he needs to block the imminent attack. Javier strikes Xerixius's chest, causing him to shout in pain and step back quickly. Despite the attack, Lloyd Frontera still maintains his grip on Xerixius. Seeing Javier running towards them for another attack, Xerixius wonders why Javier is still clinging to him, given that he is currently teleporting. Lloyd Frontera questions why Xerixius has his armor and sword with him, advising him to discard them and criticizing him for finding faults. Javier runs in for another attack, and Lloyd Frontera, observing the situation, notes that Javier is moving faster than ever before, but still struggles to match the mobility provided by teleportation. Approaching his limits and attempting to purify the blackish mana, Lloyd Frontera frets about the possibility of losing at this rate and contemplates his next move. A message window prompts him to activate Messenger Contract Clause 37, Paragraph 1. Puzzled by the sudden request, he receives a notification indicating that the request has been approved. The system further informs him that under Clause 37, Paragraph 1, the messenger is capable of providing personal advice to the individual in charge of it. Another notification suggests sing Kim Suho if he sings, he'll be able to win. Confused by the idea of singing, Javier charges to attack with his magical circle spell. In response, Lloyd Frontera begins to sing, is someone who was born to be loved. Perplexed by the unconventional approach, he describes the sensation as akin to someone scratching his brain with an iron nail. He reflects, concluding that his singing is indeed just normal, and he simply cannot sing well despite being loved. Xerixius shouts for him to stop singing. Undeterred, Lloyd Frontera continues to sing, choosing to sing about having peace like river water. He observes that it seems to be working, as demons are evidently weak against him. Confused, Javier puts his hands over his ears. Reflecting on his own singing abilities, Lloyd Frontera realizes that even his parents, who were always kind to him, had asked him never to sing in front of others. Recalling a singing class practical test where he sang only one note of O Sol Mio, he remembers his music teacher lifting the organ and throwing it at him, insisting that he should skip class if he didn't want to participate. Recalling his time in the army, he remembers joining a church service that distributed chocolate pies and involved him singing. During one service, the pastor declared the appearance of a demon and threw holy water at him. Reflecting on the notion that no skills in this world are useless, even being tone deaf is considered beneficial, he continues singing about surging love. In response, Xerixius attacks, commanding him to die and go to hell, labeling him a demon. Meanwhile, Javier uses magical circles around his ears while listening to Lloyd's song expressing surging love. Despite Xerixius's attempts to throw him away, Javier remains close and charges to attack. Lloyd Frontera releases his grip on Xerixius, causing him to fall to the ground. Lloyd exclaims hallelujah, and at that moment, Javier quickly stabs Xerixius using an aura blast, resulting in the destruction of everything around them. Lloyd Frontera breathes heavily, and Javier appears tired as well. He comments that he won't utter phrases like "did they get rid of him?" since in his experience, the other person always manages to survive. Javier asserts that it's not over and urges everyone to closely observe the mana in their vicinity. They notice Xerixius's shadow and his mana waves around them. Javier requests everyone to stand back. Despite the warning, Lloyd Frontera smiles and reassures him that it's fine, stating that Xerixius won't survive. He questions if Javier is serious about making such a statement after witnessing the recent blast going through Xerixius's head. Lloyd Frontera adds that he is willing to bet that the vote for his survival is already lost. Lloyd Frontera retrieves his shovel from the ground and proposes a bet. If he survives, he'll serve as Lloyd's subordinate for a year. If he doesn't survive, Xerixius must dress up as Javiella when they return to their country. Javier agrees, urging Lloyd to stop approaching. The bet is on, and Javier launches 3 constructive blasts, attacking Xerixius with his skills. Observing the situation, Javier wonders if Xerixius is absorbing the Hell Knight's mana. He asserts that there's no way he can handle absorbing such immense mana. He coughs and vomits blood, contemplating whether his plan worked. Despite the overwhelming amount and strength of the mana, he considers it the only available solution and wonders who will emerge victorious in the end. Employing his skill once more with full force, Xerixius laughs, suggesting that Javier can likely sense his impending defeat. Meanwhile, Xerixius falls to a lower position, bleeding. Javier and Siluria approach him, placing their hands on his back, and jointly attempt to heal him. Siluria employs her skill, the Blessing of Life, and they work together to provide complete healing. Absorbing Xerixius's mana, Lloyd Frontera declares their victory, prompting Xerixius to express his frustration with insults. As Lloyd successfully absorbs him, he announces the completion of the exorcism and then faints. Seeing this, Siluria addresses Sir Lloyd, expressing concern, while Javier reassures her not to worry, explaining that it's a form of victory ceremony that Lloyd always performs. Dismissing Javier's nonchalant attitude, Siluria insists that, as his escort knight, he should always be concerned, even if it has happened multiple times before. Although Javier claims to be worried, Siluria remarks that he doesn't appear worried at all and instructs him to quickly assist Lloyd. The system notifies him that he has defeated Xerixius, the core commander of Hell, and the King of Hell is amazed by this incredible feat, expressing a desire for him. He reflects on Canavero's arrest and transportation to prison by knights sent by the kingdom. 2 members of the Dark Sorcerer's party were captured, and the rest of the matter will be handled by the Queen. More significantly, he considers the major issue. The construction can't progress due to the barrier, leading to a loss of strength among the workers. Reflecting on the situation, he regrets not having anticipated this problem and arranged for workers from their own county when the anchor spell was cast. However, he acknowledges the need to find a solution and earn money without speaking negatively. Upon waking up after being unconscious for a few days, he is certain that he has gained some incredible skills. The system informs him that, due to absorbing a part of his power, the option Undead Domination within his mana skill has been upgraded into an individual skill. He questions whether the various limitations and requirements of the undead skill have been deleted, realizing that if he possesses the undead, he could potentially have free labor. With a smile, he considers this development as an awesome jackpot. The message window then notifies him of gaining a new title, Demon-Possessed Atrocious Singer, presented as a compliment. He reacts skeptically, questioning the sincerity of the compliment and pondering the practicality of the new skill. He wonders if it's merely a pleasant-sounding feature, or if it possesses actual utility. Reflecting on what would be more beneficial, he contemplates having a power related to hell, imagining the manifestation of hell mana from his eyes as he looks in the mirror. He remarks on how big and cool his eye appears, relishing the sight. Simultaneously, someone knocks at his door, prompting him to turn and face the door. Inquiring about the visitor's identity, he proceeds to the door and repeats the question, wondering why there is no response. Upon opening the door, he is surprised to find numerous undeads standing outside. Puzzled, he asks who they are, prompting them to attempt an answer. Upon closer inspection, he finds their appearance unsettling and comments on the grossness of their eyes. One of the undead apologizes and presents a card explaining that they are ghosts who lost their bodies due to hell sorcery. They were wandering around when they sensed a power that could grant them a physical form, leading them to come to his location. Observing them with his hell mana eye, he considers the possibility. They affirm that it's correct and express gratitude towards him, acknowledging that thanks to him, they have acquired new bodies. They convey their appreciation once again, stating that meeting him in person has confirmed that he is the one who pacified their vengeful spirits. Recalling that he buried all the skulls he found on the mountain and prayed for them, they reveal that they lack memories of their past lives and have no purpose. They fear that if they disperse and wander aimlessly, they might eventually be exorcised. To demonstrate their sincerity, they all bow down in front of him and earnestly request him to take them in, offering a chance to repay his kindness. In response, he forewarns them of the significant amount of work he'll be assigning and inquires about the need for a salary. They assert that being spirits, they have no need for money. He inquires about what they need for sustenance, and they respond that they don't possess a digestive system. When he asks about a place for them to live, they suggest providing them with a 10 cubic meter coffin. Smiling, he agrees, declaring them as members of Frontera County's workers, specifically the Skeleton Worker Squad. They express their gratitude, and he laughs, reveling in the realization of the free labor he has always dreamed of. Excitement fills the air, with both him and the newly enlisted Skeleton Workers Squad sharing in the thrill. Meanwhile, Javier looks at him with annoyance, thinking that he no longer cares about what he does. He hugs Bengal and settles down to sleep in a chair. Lloyd Frontera elucidates the unparalleled work capabilities of the Ghost Skeleton Worker Squad, emphasizing their ceaseless productivity, lack of fatigue, absence of sleep, disinterest in food, and the notable fact that they don't require wages. He recounts an incident where Count Namaran, having regained his energy, fainted upon visiting the construction site. Lloyd Frontera, emanating light from his eye, proudly declares these workers as labor spirits, underscoring his identity as a skilled summoner. He challenges anyone who doubts this ability, pointing out the distinctive eye that becomes visible when he opens it widely. Count Namaran expresses skepticism, noting the rarity of a genius summoner and highlighting that he has never encountered an instance of eyes shining in such a manner. Lloyd Frontera responds by questioning why someone like Miss Siluria can be recognized as a magic genius while he is not, and why fires can emanate from her eyes, but not from his. He issues an apology. Lloyd Frontera reflects that lies can be acceptable as long as they cause no harm, expressing a lack of concern about their morality. The message box alerts that this line of thinking appears perilous. Winter arrives, bringing with it the falling snow, and the completed anchors have arrived, marking the final stage of the slope stabilization construction of Namaran just before its completion. Javier sits atop the mountain, feeling the snow, and a memory surfaces where Miss Siluria once touched his hand. Examining his hand, he is interrupted as Miss Siluria approaches from behind, addressing him. He inquires about the progress of the construction, suggesting that detailed reports should be discussed with Master Lloyd. However, she clarifies that her purpose is to see him. He questions the reason for her visit and what she requires. She explains her stagnation in mana utilization, and witnessing his ability to control mana freely, she believes that learning this method could enhance her magic. He agrees to teach her everything he knows, eliciting joy from her. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera turns back to observe the interaction. Sometime later, he reflects on a memory where Miss Siluria lies unconscious in his hands. He contemplates that revenge was sought upon him for killing the monster, and he believes that anyone who seeks his help should leave. Frustrated, he curses and labels Javier as a cursed mana individual, convinced that he is destined to have no companions. He resigns himself to fighting alone repeatedly until exhaustion takes over and he succumbs to death. Determined not to let anyone into his heart, he acknowledges that his heart could lead others to their demise, attributing his boundless strength to a fate imposed upon him. Subsequently, Lloyd Frontera announces the flawless completion of the slope construction, assuring that regular maintenance will eliminate any concerns. He expresses gratitude for the construction payment, which surpasses the initial agreement. Count Namaran responds by stating that it's insufficient, asserting that there is more to be done. He instructs everyone to acknowledge their territory's benefactor, and the crowd collectively rises with a slogan of appreciation. He believes he has earned a substantial amount of money, is highly excited, and will indeed be able to indulge in leisure activities upon his return. Count Namaran suggests one more thing for the last time, asking how about becoming his son-in-law and inheriting Namaran. He firmly declines, stating that he is destined to be the king of his territory. He bows down and requests forgiveness for repeatedly rejecting the proposal, emphasizing that he is the heir of the Frontera family and Namaran already possesses an exceptional heir. He mentions the individual who will soon become the continent's greatest mage, Miss Siluria. He states that they will now take their leave. Count Namaran expresses gratitude, emphasizing that he won't forget the help for the rest of his life. Miss Siluria and Javier make eye contact with affection. Lloyd Frontera calls Javier, who responds affirmatively. Lloyd Frontera suggests that he stay here, assuring him of a higher salary and more excellent prospects for success in life. Javier inquires if he has lost his mind after absorbing poisonous mana, stating that they were already peculiar to begin with. Lloyd Frontera questions what he just said. Javier asserts that he is a knight of the Frontera family and will remain so for the rest of his life until he dies. Lloyd Frontera poses a hypothetical scenario, asking what if he commanded him to do so. Javier declares that he won't comply and requests execution. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges the stubbornness and suggests they depart. After a while, Erox Frontera informs Marbella that Lloyd Frontera is back and suggests they go meet him outside. They both run toward the door and see Lloyd Frontera approaching with many headless skeletons. Lloyd Frontera explains that these entities are known as the spirits of labor, summoned through his summon magic. Erox Frontera expresses acceptance, indicating that he is not surprised by what Lloyd has brought back, but inquires about Javier. He observes Javier standing there in a girl's costume. Javier reflects that he agreed to that foolish bet while he was out of sorts. Lloyd Frontera points at Javier and states that if that individual survives, he will serve as his subordinate for a year. If he does not survive, then he is to dress up as Javiella when they return to their country, and Lloyd asks how that sounds. Erox Frontera hugs and mentions that it must have been hard for him to stay inside the closet all this while. Javier insists that's not what this is. Erox reassures him, stating it's okay and not a bad thing. He is just a little different. Javier once again asserts that's not what this is. Lloyd Frontera laughs at him, hugs his parents, and thinks he is so happy to have come back home with peace of heart. The workers unload the items from the cart. He contemplates having a substantial amount of money that will allow him to do nothing but play for the rest of his life, finally achieving a state of idleness. Suddenly, the royal messenger arrives and announces the royal order. He states that Lloyd Frontera is ordered to be a part of the special envoy departing to Isfahan. Lloyd Frontera exclaims, "What?" The messenger clarifies that he is to leave immediately. Soldiers dress him and hold him, initiating the process of dragging him away. After a while, the caravan of the queen passes through their way. Lloyd Frontera sits sadly inside the cart. Javier places his hand on his head and advises him not to cry, stating it's too ugly. Lloyd asks how he is supposed not to cry. Delegation Captain Count Ventura inquires why he looks so upset when he has just received an honorable mission from the Queen. Lloyd expresses that he feels so honored that his tears cannot stop flowing, and he wonders why he would go there. He questions why she sent him there. He wishes to go home. He hates her. The scene shifts to a flashback. Queen Alicia Termina Magentano asks the reason why she chose Lloyd Frontera to be in the delegation. Count Ventura agrees, acknowledging that while Lloyd contributed significantly in the aftermath of the losses incurred due to the monsters, he is unsure how that would make him an excellent diplomatic official. He expresses his query due to his lack of wisdom. She clarifies that being a diplomatic official has nothing to do with that. Count Ventura asks why she would choose him. She assures him of one thing: from the moment he receives the order to become an envoy, he will cry and create a huge fuss. She explains that this is because his dream of living a carefree life in a quiet corner of the kingdom will be destroyed. She adds that the report she received regarding the Namoran incident stated that the Knights of Namarana had defeated the Hell Knight. She asserts that Lloyd and his escort knight simply gathered information and provided it to them, considering it nonsense. Even if the summon was incomplete, it's not an entity that mere knights can defeat. She is confident that Lloyd and his knight were the ones who beat it, and must have asked Count Namoran to keep their actual involvement a secret. She suggests that Count Namoran might have just written a line because he could not do that, describing Lloyd as the kind of man who is not interested in success or fame. He simply wants to indulge in leisure activities. She concludes that's why she is certain he will definitely bring back results, as he easily bears grudges and is a materialistic person who's constantly charming. He wonders if she's complimenting him or insulting him. She advises that even if he looks like he's about to die, they should leave him be, and he'll understand eventually after weighing out the pros and cons. She predicts that he will realize that Samarkand has something he wants. The scene shifts back to the present. Lloyd Frontera continues to cry. Count Ventura observes that he doesn't seem like someone who understands anything, and he can't bring himself to like this man who is so materialistic, only desiring money and ignoring honor. Meanwhile, a soldier kneels down in front of Samarkand and respectfully addresses him as the great and all-powerful Sultan. He informs Samarkand that Magentano's delegation will soon arrive at the place. Samar Khan instructs him to ensure that they receive the treatment they deserve. After a while, Count Ventura arrives at the palace and inquires if there isn't a mistake here. They are the envoys of Magentano. He questions if they are genuinely suggesting that this is their accommodation and whether it's acceptable to be this disrespectful to diplomatic officials. A well-dressed man responds that there's no mistake. They simply followed the orders of the all-powerful Samar Khan. Count Ventura asserts that they will see Samar Khan immediately and then bring them to him. He informs him that Samar Khan is currently busy with state matters, so he won't be able to grant them an audience. Count Ventura asks how long they need to wait in such a place. He replies that he's not sure, but at least 6 months. Count Ventura exclaims, asking what nonsense that is. He presents him with a necklace and explains that if he dislikes the accommodations, he can use this padishira to find better lodging. As long as he possesses this padishir in Isfahan, he will receive the blessings and grace of the all-powerful Samar Khan. Count Ventura questions if he is treating the envoys of the Magentano kingdom like beggars. The man clarifies that he seems to misunderstand. It's an honor for him to be bestowed with this padishir. He throws the necklace on the floor and leaves, bidding them to have a good rest. Count Ventura becomes enraged, verbally abuses them, and asserts that they have gone too far in insulting their kingdom, essentially declaring it an act of war. The royal messenger inquires about what they should do. Count Ventura informs him that he has sent a letter back to their kingdom, requesting them to send a large delegation here. They must let the surrounding countries know about this fact to exert pressure on them. He mentions that he hasn't seen the young master of Frontera around anywhere for a while now. Count Ventura advises not to pay any attention to him, emphasizing that what's more important now is the whereabouts of the padishir that was on the ground just now. He asks where it went. After a while, a poor little girl holding a basket pleads, "Please buy some torches." They light up very quickly. A man becomes angry and retorts, "Don't get in his way, beggar." She sits in a corner, starts crying, and laments that she was not able to sell torches again today. She doesn't know where she should hide and sleep tonight. Lloyd Frontera arrives and asks if she is looking for a place to sleep. He offers to help her and invites her to come with him. After a while, Lloyd Frontera is walking with a little girl in the market. She states that this inn is the most expensive inn in the capital, and she cannot let him, someone she is meeting for the first time, do this for her. He laughs and informs her that she is mistaken. This inn is his, and he has just bought it. He shows her the papers and states that this is the title deed. She should sign here and take it. She inquires about his identity. He shows her the padishir necklace and states that he is someone who has been blessed with the grace of the all-powerful Samar Khan. Displaying the padishir, he announces that he will be treating everyone to the most expensive meal in this restaurant, with him footing the bill. A person is shocked to see the padishir and remarks that it is the padishir that can buy anything. Another person mentions that it is their first time visiting it. Lloyd Frontera instructs them to call all their family members, relatives, and neighbors. Tonight, there shall be no hunger in this city. Everyone becomes excited. He emphasizes that they have the blessing of the all-powerful Samar Khan. He goes to a shop and asks if this is the most expensive silk in this city. The shopkeeper responds that no, this is the most expensive silk in the whole world. He points out and specifies that in that case exclude those and give him everything else. After a while, he goes to the seaside. A healthy man asks if he wants to borrow a personal sailing boat. He shows padishir, points to a big ship, and states that no, he wants to buy it, and he will buy all the perfumes and condiments that are in this market. Please prepare to fill 6 of his sailing boats fully. He mentions that they will pass through Cremo and get to Frontera. All the other shopkeepers also display their items and request him to buy them too. A person asks if he does not need the sword. Lloyd Frontera replies, "Okay, please line up, and for the grace of the Samar Khan, reach everyone." Just then, the soldiers arrive there, point at Lloyd Frontera, and say, "There he is, catch him." They apprehend Lloyd Frontera and Javer, tie them with rope, place swords on their necks, and present them in front of King Samar Khan. He inquires if he is the person who spent a whole year's worth of the palace's budget. Lloyd Frontera identifies himself as Arcos Frontera's son, Lloyd Frontera, and he pays his respects to the great and all-powerful Samar Khan. He looks at him and reflects that this is Lloyd Frontera who flipped the monster domino. This is what he was after. He realizes that Lloyd Frontera did all that so that he could meet him. He looks at him and thinks he needs to prevent a war from happening. as the border that their territory relies on will become a battlefield. He considers that if a war starts, the first person they will face is him, and even if the kingdom mobilizes its entire army to destroy the Frontera territory, he can't guarantee they will win. He ponders the unpredictable attack power and acknowledges that he does not know what secret operations might be underway. He contemplates whether he should kill him now. However, he sees Javier and decides against it, realizing that there's a bomb inside the palace. Even if he defeats this sword master, the capital city might turn to ash. Lloyd Frontera thinks deeply, considering that there might be another choice for the great Sultan Samar Khan besides talking. Samar Khan thinks, how dare he threaten him? He commands him to let him go. Lloyd Frontera believes he has won. He asks if he likes it. Lloyd Frontera inquires about what he is talking about. Samar Khan clarifies that he is referring to Potashar and asks if it feels great to use it as he pleases. Lloyd Frontera raises his hands, bends down, and exclaims Hora to the great Sultan, expressing his enthusiasm. He wonders what's happening to him and feels flustered because he can sense his sincerity. Lloyd Frontera concludes that it's because he is sincere and sincerely thanks him. He reflects that this situation is similar to a memory he has, where a president handed him a card before a meeting, suggesting it would make him feel better. He ponders what he can do but use it, realizing that luxury and money are the best remedies. He concludes that if money can't buy happiness, it's because one does not have enough money. Samar Khan asks if he is not afraid of Magentano's suspicions and mentions that he accepted to lead the nation's escort, even bowing his head in thanks. He questions if Lloyd Frontera is not worried. Lloyd Frontera responds that no, he is not. Samar Khan thinks to himself, how can he be so arrogant, replying without even considering it? Lloyd Frontera explains that it's because the money that the Magentano kingdom gave him is more than what His Grace, the Sultan, offered him. He suggests that this implies if he were to receive more money, he might betray the king. Lloyd Frontera confirms this and privately wonders if he is crazy to think his eyes are quivering because he can't read him. He mentions that if he were to serve the Sultan merely because he succumbed to the temptation of money, he is concerned that the Sultan would question his loyalty. Samar Khan laughs and thinks to himself how dare this person play him, and then agrees, stating that he will hear what he has to say. He admires his audacity, realizing that he wants to integrate him into his circle. Lloyd Frontera internally celebrates a small victory and inquires if the great Sultan desires war. He questions what he would do in such a scenario. Lloyd Frontera speculates whether it is because he wants to suppress foreign enemies after the drought led to a rise in unstable power. He assures that if so, he will end the drought and promises to allow the Sultan to communicate with Magentano's delegation. Samar Khan expresses interest and asks for more details. Lloyd Frontera then presents him with some papers, signaling another triumph. After a while, Lloyd Frontera sits at the table with Javier, holding papers, and asks if he saw the Sultan's face when he wrote the contract. He laughs and remarks that the Sultan seemed to be sweating. Javier agrees, commenting that it's an unbelievable amount, and Lloyd Frontera is going to go down in history for being the first to outmaneuver a Sultan. Lloyd Frontera questions what he means by screwing him over and argues that this deal is much cheaper than war. He explains that the areas of Isfahan are gradually becoming impoverished due to drought, and Samarkand is not actively aiding them. Eventually, the whole area united and revolted. He reflects on the order of events in this world, particularly in this situation, being completely different from the novel. He concludes that if a war breaks out before the rebellion, it will result in a significant loss. He believes that the best choice right now is to mitigate the danger. Meanwhile, Samar Khan stands on the rooftop, and his daughter, Sarajard, approaches him and asks if he called for her. He informs her that he will assign her a mission. Tomorrow, a man named Lloyd Frontera will head to Kandahar, and she will be his escort and make him hers, no matter what. She acknowledges his command and agrees to follow it. The scene shifts to the next day as Sarajard approaches Lloyd Frontera, holding his camel rope. She introduces herself as Sarajard, who will be escorting him. She will be in his care. He politely excuses himself, stating that he already has an escort knight. She persists, affirming that she will be in his care. Lloyd Frontera perceives her as stubborn and wonders if she is here to monitor him. He recalls her name and reflects on her identity as Isfahan's princess, questioning why a princess would be going to a construction site. She demonstrates her determination and reiterates that she will be in his care. He observes her unexpected chic pose, but is perplexed by the intensity in her eyes, sensing hostility. He interprets her actions as a message to win his affection. However, he doubts Sarajard's affection towards him. He speculates that Samar Khan desires him to become his son-in-law and dismisses the notion of receiving affectionate letters from the older man. Lloyd Frontera explains that the solution to solving the drought is Kanat. It's similar to the trench that was used in the Fursia kingdom, and the stream of hot water from the desert ground will evaporate before it reaches the city. He states that's why they need to make the tunnel deep underground, and in the desert, dozens of kilometers from the city, there is a clean water source made from perpetual snow, and that's what they are going to use. Meanwhile, in the heart of Kandahar's central city, Kondara, Lloyd Frontera lies down on the bed and says he finally gets to rest. He thinks he wants to sleep today, but it's so freaking burdensome. He recalls Sarajard's poses and thinks like those eyes, she makes him feel like she will slice his stomach open and then take all his guts and intestines out. He gets up and sees Sarajard making poses and asks if they can talk for a bit. He suggests first that she stand comfortably. He asks why it feels like she is ready to chop his neck off. She responds that it's a natural pose. He agrees and says yes, he understands. Let's compromise. He thinks about Sarajard, the youngest of the 4 princesses of the desert, whom Samar Khan treasures the most. She is a swordsman who earned the title of sword expert at a young age. He acknowledges that the desert princesses are concealed, and no one outside the palace knows their identity. He decides that he should feign ignorance of her identity, and that he needs to thwart her seduction plan no matter what. He asks if she shouldn't also rest during the night. She responds that Samar Khan ordered her to guard him. Day or night, she must stay next to him. He insists that he doesn't need an additional guard day and night. He points to Javier and asks if she sees that guy over there, just staring at him. He clarifies that, as he has said, he's his escort guard, a swordmaster. He states that he is a high sword master at that. 10 people like Miss Sarajard know he would rather have him than 50 of her. He clarifies that he doesn't need her. That's what he is saying. She gets angry and takes out her sword. He observes that she got angry and pulled out her sword, and he is scared and trembling. He gestures, instructing her to slice quickly and then report to Samar Khan. He states that if he were to slice off the neck of the person he was supposed to guard, then Samar Khan would say, "This man who couldn't even become a swordmaster managed to ruin their mission. How amazing." He explains that as a reward, Samar Khan would put his head on a picket with a message written on it, mocking his inability to become a swordmaster, emphasizing that he wouldn't be able to achieve it even if he were reborn 50 times. She punches him in the face. He protests, reminding her that she's hitting the person she's supposed to guard, and calls out to Javier for help, asking him what he's doing. Javier responds by asking if he's having fun. She continues to beat him and declares him the worst trash before leaving the room. He lies on the bed with a swollen face and remarks that the plan was successful. Javier asks if he wants to get beaten up by a beautiful lady and comments that his taste is quite strange. He denies it, stating that getting beaten up was not part of the plan, and asks why Javier did not protect him. Javier apologizes, acknowledging that he deserved it, so he did not intervene. He questions the expression on his face, wondering if he is genuinely reflecting or just displaying his excellent acting skills. Javier speculates that Miss Sarajard was trying to seduce him and asks for the reason for provoking her so much. He states that first, he does not like the heat and the cold. If he ends up living here because he got involved with a Sveihan, it will be the worst scenario. Therefore, he needs her to completely give up on her mission. He questions if, with her considerable swordsmanship skill, there isn't something much more important that she needs to do instead of seducing a man. Meanwhile, Sarajard is practicing her sword outside. After finishing it, she moves inside and asks where he is sneaking off. Lloyd Frontera explains that they are preparing for construction, and mobility is critical. Therefore, if they have a rookie with them, they will lose speed. She assures him that she won't get in his way, so she will follow him. He responds that it's not as easy as she thinks since she is not a swordmaster. She tries to attack him again, but he casts some spells to stop her. She wonders what kind of magic that is. He continued his spell, and she thought it might be a sleeping spell, but she couldn't fall asleep now. He repeats the spell, and she falls asleep there, lying on the floor. He thinks that for those who have Swordmaster Syndrome, this is the best way. He turns to Javier and asks if he can take her, but he is also sleeping there. He questions why he is sleeping and remarks that he really wants to be funny. After a while, Lloyd Frontera walks down the street with Javier, placing his shovel on his shoulder. The people look at him strangely and stare. Javier remarks that the stares they are getting are not great. Lloyd Frontera agrees, stating that they are city folks who are not taking care of the dying countryside, but are living their best life in the capital. He explains that this project is not just large. They need the cooperation of the people here, but currently it's useless. He adds that it's not like they need to worry since gaining their collaboration is so easy. He then calls Pipodong, Bangol, Hameng and Jigoming. He instructs Javier, Pipodong and Bangol to go to the city center and build an intake station. Pipodong and Bangol run toward the city. He announces that Jigoming and Hameng are coming with him to the perpetual snowfield 40 kilometers south. He sits on Jigoming and starts flying, saying, "Let's go." Hameng uses his one-shot power to absorb the water, and Jigoming holds him with his spider net. On the other side, Bangol and Pipodong dig a well between the city, and Hameng pours all the water into it. The people there are happy to see the water and exclaim that there is water in the square. They all take their buckets and approach the well. Just then, Lloyd Frontera arrives and asks if they are happy or overjoyed. He wonders if he did something good and asserts that he did it, urging them to be grateful and to let everyone know about it. Lloyd Frontera addresses a crowd, asserting that he is the one who brought water from the very distant mountains. He states his name and requests that they remember him. The crowd becomes angry, and one person admonishes him to stop showing off, resorting to verbal abuse. Lloyd declares his intention to exploit them for a mere gulp of water, and in response, they hurl stones at him. Unfazed, he laughs and inquires if they are now full of energy, attributing their condition to him and laughing again. Despite their protests that he is not being hit, they find him annoying. Lloyd believes they won't easily let go of their resentful grudges, especially as he observes a person in a green dress. Acknowledging the stubborn individuals who have yet to touch the water, he plans to appeal to them little by little persistently. Meanwhile, people arrive at the well and remark that the water is filled to the top again. Another person wonders if it tops up every day. In response, it is stated that indeed Lloyd Frontera ensures this, committing to filling it up with water without skipping a day. The belief is that he will continue this practice until all men, women, children, and the elderly are on his side, and he laughs loudly. The onlookers comment that this situation is like a boomerang curved ball, and though he was close, he didn't get hit by it. Lloyd plans to bombard them with advertisements similar to brainwashing. During the night, a family enjoys their dinner, and their baby girl drinks water, expressing amazement at being able to drink as much water as she likes. She considers it like a dream, while Lloyd Frontera appears inside their house from the window. The baby girl notices him, and he points towards the water, stating that he provides it. The family finds this annoying, and it's sinking in. The people get irritated and annoyed by the person in the city informing them that the water is Lloyd, and this idea begins to sink in. He wanders in the city and once again encounters the person in the green dress, who removes their scarf, revealing long, shiny hair. They both gaze at each other and share a smile. After a while, he arrives at the water umbrella and proclaims that the water is Lloyd. He screams so loudly that he declares himself as Lloyd Tur. Javier asks if he performed group hypnosis, to which he responds that it's called continuous and diverse marketing. He asserts that water is good, and water is Lloyd, concluding that Lloyd is good. He suggests it for headaches, toothaches, or period pain. The message window confirms that it's Dvorin. He replies, well, something like that, while Javier observes him and reflects on his loneliness. The message window questions why he said that, and he explains that he said it for himself. Nonetheless, he states that since the groundwork is done, people should line up, as he is recruiting workers for groundwater construction. Meanwhile, he arranges the table for negotiating contracts with people for groundwater construction. A person approaches and politely asks to excuse him, Sir Lloyd Tur, if meals are provided. He responds, please don't worry about that. Food from all over the nation is coming here, as he displays a shiny pendant and mentions reporting to the almighty Samarkand. He presents the Padishar record detailing what Lloyd Frontera used on the way to Kandahar, while Samarkand reads a lengthy message sent by Lloyd. Samarkand becomes angry and verbally abuses him. On the other side, Lloyd Frontera and Javier sit on Jigoming and fly. Lloyd reflects that, as expected, he can't see it, indicating it's deeper than 5 meters. He considers that employing the citizens won't matter, and that digging a 35-kilometer waterway will take too long. He concludes that what he needs now are the rebel organization's tunnels to escape the suppression of religious people from hundreds of years ago used by the rebel forces. Lloyd thinks there's only one way to find these tunnels. Meanwhile, they arrive at the palace, where Sarajard directs her sword toward Javier, stating that she'll repeat herself, "Please move aside." Javier, positioned by the door, apologizes, explaining that the young master desires solitude for the night. She argues that there is a power shift, a rebellion, and it's perilous to leave Sir Lloyd alone, while he sits in his room contemplating something. Javier agrees, acknowledging the potential danger, but asserts that the young master insisted he would be fine. As he speaks, robbers discreetly enter his room through the window. Sarajard emphasizes the need for an escort guard to prepare for unforeseen situations, expressing concern that unexpected danger might befall Sir Lloyd. Javier rejects the suggestion, affirming the young master's judgment. Sarajard remarks that he is an adamant person, and then attempts to skillfully bypass him. She attacks Javier, who calmly blocks her assault with his sword and remains standing unperturbed. Javier acknowledges her talent, stating that no one could overlook her current skill. In response, she becomes angry and repeatedly attacks him. However, he calmly blocks all her assaults and advises her not to forcibly increase her mana, as humans can't store more mana than a certain amount. He further explains that she should oscillate the mana particles quickly, emphasizing that the energy generated from these vibrations is crucial to becoming a sword master. She declares that she has no intention of learning from him. Javier reveals that the young master, Lloyd, requested him to attempt turning her into a sword master. Meanwhile, the robbers kidnap Lloyd Frontera from inside the room, tying him up on a chair and covering his face. They form a circle around him. Termes questions Lloyd Ter, the person who came from the capital, asking about his intentions in their city. Lloyd breathes heavily and requests them to uncover his face. They comply, revealing his face. Lloyd reflects on the situation, finding it strange that although they are the ones who kidnapped him, it feels like they are the ones who got kidnapped. Lloyd Frontera states that if they want to know why he came, they'll need to first hear the details of the situation that brought him there. He mentions that his hands are in an uncomfortable position and asks if they can please be released first. Termes warns him not to attempt anything foolish. Lloyd responds, questioning what tricks he could pull in this situation, emphasizing that they are all elite warriors daring to revolt against Samarkand. He acknowledges that a person like him would only get his head cut off if he tried to resist. Termes inquires if he already figured out that they are the rebel forces and asks if he predicted their arrival. Lloyd smiles and replies that considering the commotion caused by the person taking orders from Samarkand, he assumed they all would be a little bothered by that. He contemplates that Termes will likely die attempting to stage a revolt, and this event will lead to all the regions in Isfahan coming together for a massive revolt in response to his death. Termes instructs his subordinate to release Lloyd's hands, emphasizing that he's from the capital. However, Termes reiterates that they can kill him if he acts suspiciously. As he opens Lloyd's hands, Lloyd expresses gratitude, stating that he is kind, and he believes he will be blessed. He tells him to shut up. Termes thinks that, despite being an agent of Samarkand, he does owe Lloyd a debt, and it's acceptable to show him some kindness. Termes reflects on sitting near his child on her deathbed, where she apologized for being weak. He recalls telling Similda to forgive him and regrets sharing the water they barely managed to gather, thinking he should have given it to Lloyd instead. Termes hears voices as people shout that water is available in the city plaza, where a huge beast is drawing water. His daughter also gets up to drink water. Returning to the present, Lloyd Frontera is now free from ropes and stands in front of Termes. Termes warns him again not to do anything foolish because, even though he released Lloyd's hands, he'll cut him down. Annoyed, Lloyd Frontera looks at him. Termes observes Lloyd's suspicious expression and orders his men to get him, and they all run to attack him. Lloyd calmly stands there and begins narrating a story from 2 years and 6 months ago. He recounts how the family in charge of the Frontera barony, a small territory on the eastern border of the Magentano kingdom, was at risk of ruin due to great debt. He describes the feeling as if the skies were going to fall, the earth was going to split, and everything looked hopeless, with only darkness in front of their eyes. He proceeds to share his life history, detailing how he defeated monsters, constructed different cities, and so on. He narrates that at that moment he turned around, and there was a gigantic lobster. Javier initiated a fight with Lyle using his sword, and Kyle's sword struck right into Javier's shoulder. They all sit down to enjoy his stories with popcorn. He mentions the awakening of the sword master, creating excitement, and playfully scares them. Termiz's popcorn fell down, and he questioned how the conversation shifted from the original topic. Lloyd responds, asking them to wait as it gets interesting from that point. Another person complains, asking why he is disrupting the flow. Termiz shouts, calling him a fool, stating that they are rebel forces putting their lives at risk and don't have time to listen to stories. Lloyd Frontera continues, describing thousands of locusts as big as dogs that dyed the sky black, laughing loudly and frightening them all. He narrates that at that moment, Captain Frontera appeared while seated on the Jigoming with Termiz. Termiz inquires about his destination, and Captain Frontera responds, asking if they weren't going to meet his queen together. Termiz questions how things ended up like this and admits he doesn't even remember the context. Captain Frontera suggests that he might have to start over again, going back 2 years. Termiz refuses and pleads for him to stop already. Captain Frontera insists that to conclude, he needs the underground hideout of the rebel forces to create a waterway. If Termiz hands over the hideout, the Magentano Kingdom will allow all of them to seek asylum and provide protection. He asks if Termiz remembers now, and Termiz confirms that he did say that. Captain Frontera requests Termiz's trust, promising to obtain asylum for the rebel forces and all their families. They arrive at the palace of Queen Alicia Termina Magentano, who has tied a person in a magical circle for confession. The person, Lord Targa, starts coughing and vomiting blood, confessing that they are the Black Wizards. The queen instructs her wizards to stop, stating that it's enough for today. She thinks about Targa and realizes she'll have to find that individual. A guard arrives, informing her that Lloyd Frontera is waiting to seek an audience with her. She wonders why he is there when he's supposed to be at Isfahan. Lloyd Frontera and Termiz enter the court, bowing and greeting the queen. She agrees to write up a document for Termiz, his comrades, and their families, granting them asylum in the kingdom. Lloyd Frontera expresses his gratitude for her generosity, and Termiz ponders how she agreed so easily. He wonders if he will indeed meet the queen directly and obtain a document of approval, questioning who this man truly is. The queen remarks that he is employing methods beyond her expectations, but she is pleased as he diligently executes her orders. He modestly replies that he doesn't deserve such praise. She emphasizes that those who are competent always work themselves to the bone to ensure citizens can lead peaceful lives. The queen informs him about progress in the interrogation of Cannavaro, mentioning that there will be some work for him soon. She instructs him to cooperate when the time comes. He responds that he would be honored to do so, bowing in front of her. She comments that his face really seems to say otherwise, and he responds, explaining that it's just because he's tired from flying for 10 days straight. She questions if he wants to see her that badly, asserting that he's not a petty and selfish man who would feign ignorance even though she missed him. As she walks towards him, she comes closer and grabs his face, asking him to come looking for her only when he needs her. He thinks to himself, realizing that the greatest obstacle in his peaceful and luxurious retirement plan is the queen. Sarajard becomes tired and sits down to rest, while Javier remains standing by the door. After some time, she gets up and announces that she's finished resting and suggests they start again. They resume their activities. Javier wonders how long he'll have to continue doing this and when that jerk will return. She unleashes her full mana powers to attack him, but he swiftly blocks her attack. Javier reflects that she is still unstable, but she's on the verge of becoming a sword master. Lloyd Frontera arrives and opens the door, trapping Javier behind it. He waves his hand and announces his return. As her mana powers stab through the door, tearing his clothes, Javier looks at him in shock, expressing concern that someone could have been killed. Lloyd asks whom he means, himself or Lloyd. She questions his identity, while Javier asks what she has been doing since escaping from him. He walks towards her while she pleads for him to stop. After a while, she lies down and falls asleep. He apologizes for being too preoccupied with explaining all the details. He suggests to Javier that they start the construction. However, Javier also lies down and begins to snore. He remarks that he expected this reaction from Javier, but it works too well for him. The first step is to venture outside. He runs while contemplating the labyrinth-like underground tunnel and measures it. Thanks to the map provided by Termes, the process goes smoothly. The second step is to confirm the location and identify areas that need to be opened or blocked for the direct waterway. The third step involves blocking off paths other than the waterway route during the day. At night, Javier will use controlled blasts to clear the paths. Javier stabs the mountain and unleashes his mana blast. As he does so, he reflects that he wants to expedite this process. If they aren't cautious, the underground tunnel could collapse, marking the long-awaited Step 4. Addressing his undead warriors, he praises their punctuality. Termes inquires about their identity, to which Javier explains that when he visited Magentano, he sent a letter back home to bring some workers from there. These workers are essential for completing the construction. The undead warriors express their fondness for him, addressing him as master. He instructs them to listen carefully, noting the significant volume of water on the other side of the wall. He asks them to consider what would happen if he were to strike another blow into the wall. They respond that they believe they would be swept away instantly due to the immense water pressure. Affirming their response, he mentions how ancient people risked their lives to construct qanats. Correcting himself, he states that they didn't just risk their lives, they sacrificed them. Among the laborers, the eldest one steps forward. Corgidus also joins them and begins digging. He declares his willingness to sacrifice his life to complete the opening of the waterway. Meanwhile, Corgidus strikes the rock, causing it to break and release water. He immerses himself in it and declares that for the sake of their neighbors and descendants, they will continue to live, emphasizing that there is no sacrifice, beauty, or nobility in their actions. He points towards, asserting that honor will belong to him. Surprised, Tords looks at him while the undead holds the bag in which Corgidus sits. Expressing gratitude, he assures them that he won't forget this act and pledges to remember it always. Tords stands up and runs towards him, urging him to wait and questioning why he needs to do this when he has the ghosts. In response, he asks what Tords just said, branding himself as a cold-blooded bastard, and expresses his desire for the dead to experience death once more. Tords points out that he has a sword master, asking if he can't handle it. He explains that he only has one set of clothes and cannot afford to get them wet. The message window declares damn, he'd even have Satan himself step down for him. He ponders what's wrong with that, as he believes he's just giving meaning to that beggar's life. The message window further notifies that he's even scarier because he actually means those words. In his room, King of Hell Helcaros sits and attends to some work. He chuckles and remarks that the upper messengers sure are enjoying their show, adding let's see just how far this goes. Lloyd Frontera reports that after a long time of bickering, the leader of the Ghost Skeleton Worker Squad, Turtleneck, took it upon himself to finish the work. The undead and all other members engage in the construction work of the tunnel, and they begin to channel water into it, with a few undead floating in the water. The people become happy to see water and store it in their containers. They say it's water. An endless supply of water is gushing forth. They pour water on themselves happily and drink it. Termes' daughter also fills her bowl with water and says, "Please have it. It's water that he made." Lloyd Frontera sits near her, puts his hand on her head, and thanks her. He says he'll enjoy it while taking the bowl from her. She asks why he is walking around without a shirt. He smiles and says that he doesn't want to waste money buying clothes. He reflects on how the central waterway in Kondara was established, along with its connections to the small villages around it, all around the time the whole project reached completion. The system notifies him that he has acquired a new, highly praised, high-ranking person who wears underwear. He wonders about the nature of this praise and whether it's mocking him, but the system assures him that being a high-ranking person is an excellent thing. He decides he doesn't need that, he just wants an awesome-sounding title. As he observes the status screen, he thinks about how he saved a city from a long-term drought. He notes that the effects of this praise area with hot weather have 100% increased resistance against dehydration. He concludes that it's not like he has much business in other desirable locations. Meanwhile, he contemplates that he's going to chill and relax from now on, realizing that this effect won't be helpful to him. Termes calls out to him, snapping him out of his thoughts, and asks if he's done preparing for the long journey ahead of them. Termes kneels down and expresses that he has saved countless people, stopped a war and a drought, and even facilitated their asylum. As a result, they would like to swear their eternal loyalty to the Frontera County. The entire tribe kneels in front of Lloyd Frontera. He responds, reassuring them that there's no need to go so far as to swear their loyalty. He suggests they need to work hard within the territory. However, he acknowledges to himself that he did all of that for his own gains anyway, but repeatedly hearing people thanking him makes him feel guilty. The system notifies him that friendliness has increased. Termis and his comrades express their respect and gratitude to him, and his friendliness increases bonus RP by 50. The system notifies him that from now on, Termis and his comrades will have increased friendliness towards the people of Frontera County, and his RP reaches 2832. He thinks, yes, this is it. He doesn't feel bad about getting rewards like this. What a perfect reward. Similder remarks to her father that this guy's face looks weird. Termes responds that his face might look like that, but he's still an incredible person. He observes the skeleton workers squad leading Termes's party as they head towards Frontera County. As they depart, he waves his hand to them, feeling like things have ended peacefully. The scene shifts to Isfahan's capital Ahinsha, where Samarkand declares that Lloyd Frontera has become his man as he kneels in front of him with Javier by his side. He jests, asking for forgiveness from the great Samarkand, but expressing a preference for slimmer types. Samarkand questions if Lloyd does not understand what he's saying or if he is merely feigning ignorance. He must have realized that Sarajard is his daughter and asks if it is not his liking. Lloyd Frontera responds that the feelings of Lady Sarajard are more critical than those of this lowly servant. He privately thinks he doesn't want to be under Samarkand's control, disliking both his face and his actions, and would prefer him to cut his head off. Samarkand interrupts, putting an end to that matter for now. Since Lloyd has kept his promise, it's now his turn to reciprocate. He adds that he will meet with Majanatano's delegation right away to hear them out. He expresses gratitude for Samarkand's generosity and reflects that it took a long time just to convince him to do so. He walks out with Javier. Samarkand watches him leave and thinks about Lloyd Frontera, how he always gets what he wants, making him admirable. He also smiles behind him. During a royal meeting, Count Venture considers how Lloyd Frontera managed to persuade Samarkand to sit at the negotiation table, recognizing the tremendous opportunity created. He resolves not to let it go to waste. Samarkand apologizes for the mistake that caused significant losses to the Magentano kingdom. Count Venture notes Samarkand's unusual apology and thinks that the arrogant Samarkand apologized first. Samarkand promises to compensate for the losses caused by the monster domino. Furthermore, he pledges to assign a special task force to oversee such matters to prevent them from happening again. He assures that he'll keep the Magentano kingdom updated on its progress and promises to pay double compensation if such an incident occurs again. Count Venture thinks this isn't something to be happy about. What on earth is he going to ask of them? He says he'd like to express his thanks for their generosity and says he'll pass on his intentions to their queen. Samarkand says in return he'd like to have Lloyd Frontera come along as well, and Count Venture sees him at the door half naked. He asks what he said, while Count Venture responds that's what he said, and says he's sure the queen will be happy. They have obtained a lot out of the negotiations, and he's confident that he'll be able to do well no matter where he is while showing some gestures. He replies don't worry, he did great, and says that's perfect. Samarkand thinks about what he should ask him to do first and thinks they'll start with road maintenance and expanding the waterway. Hygiene facilities are urgent as well, and they need to build a more enormous castle and more prominent buildings. A person with a white cap enters, bows, and pays his respects to Samarkand, addressing him as wise and omnipotent. Samarkand questions why he didn't ask him to bring Lloyd Frontera along and why he is alone. The person explains that Lloyd went out, stating he'd get rid of the sandworm near the city. Samarkand is surprised and asks what he means by getting rid of the sandworm. The scene shifts to Lloyd Frontera, who reaches the desert and observes a sandworm. He thinks to himself, desert devourer sandworm, it feeds on insects and cactus thorns. He starts digging and unleashes a mana blast, shouting Pipodong. It's his turn as Pipodong arrives and attacks the sandworms. He calls for Javier to finish it, and Javier draws his sword and joins the attack. He asks the persistent bastard if he's still alive while he cuts the sandworm and points his shovel, commanding the sandworm to die. They both attack the sandworm, proclaiming they will kill it for Samarkand, and he laughs. Samarkand and his subordinates arrive, and Samarkand suggests asking them to take that crazy bastard back with them, a sentiment with which his subordinate agrees. Afterward, they return to the palace and Samarkand sits in his room, contemplating the consequences of keeping such a whack job near him. He worries that the whole country may fall into chaos. He reaffirms his decision, believing he made the right choice. Since he's the one who had a change of heart, he can't retract the terms he mentioned. However, he wonders how to cover up the deficit using Potta Shire. He questions why Lloyd used so much money for the construction. He realizes that he has been losing tons of money from the very start. Suddenly, a warrior enters his room and informs Samarkand that there's big trouble. Samarkand inquires about the issue, and the warrior explains that the man has taken the Potta Shire with him. Shortly after, another person with a white cap enters and announces that they have a big problem. Samarkand once again asks for clarification. The person with the white cap responds that Lady Surjard has run away. She left a letter stating that she had things to learn from him and asked them not to look for her. Samarkand puts his head on the table, feeling emotional, and expresses his frustration with abuse. Arcos, Frontera, and Marbella wake up, and Arcos looks out from the window, thinking that today is a peaceful day in Frontera County. He finds it a little strange that it's by Bayung instead of Cock-a-doodle-doo, but it's still a good place. Emily enters and informs them that they have a letter from Master Julian. They read the letter, in which Julian tells them that he graduated second in his class as one of the top scorers and has been honored with the opportunity to work in the capital. He expresses his intention to return home and stay there until he receives the official appointment letter. He tells his parents that he misses them so much and shares that his brother is also doing well. Julian promises to try to become a reliable son like his brother. Both Arcos and Marbella become emotional after reading the letter. Marbella asks Arcos about Julian, and he reassures her, saying that Julian is already a dependable son, and that they're very proud of such happiness. Meanwhile, Bayern arrives and announces that the items Master Lloyd sent back from Isfahan have arrived. They both step out and behold numerous gifts and treasures. Marbella opens one box of treasure and exclaims her goodness. They're all costly luxury items. A delivery person asks him to sign a receipt, presenting him with the document. He agrees and signs it. Marbella takes out a necklace and admires the pretty jewels, suggesting they can sell them at a high price to vain nobles. She smiles as he agrees, proposing they sell them at a high price. He reflects that Marbella seems to have become a little strange, but he remains a pleased man. Some farmers spot them and greet them, expressing their gratitude. They wave back and say they didn't do much, wishing them a great day ahead. He reflects on his happiness that there are only good people within their county, including good orcs, as orc warriors arrive. After a while, Officer Greg and an orc warrior confront each other, and the warrior attacks him. Arcos and Marbella become worried upon seeing this. Officer Greg, with a severe expression, expresses his desire to fight and pushes the orc warrior. The warrior retaliates, but Officer Greg swiftly dodges the attack and throws him to the ground, initiating a dance. The orc warrior gets up and rechallenges him, and other orc warriors join in the dance. Both groups dance skillfully in front of Arcos and Marbella Frontera, pleasing them. Arcos thinks they're a little weird, but they're all good people, including both humans and orcs and other good living organisms. What a pickle. The undead also greets Lloyd Frontera's parents. Good morning. Arcos reflects on the peaceful coexistence of inorganic and organic matter in the county, feeling happy. Meanwhile, they observe Lord Solitas throwing fire into a well, finding it a little strange, but interpreting it as part of morning prayers. They then witness many people bowing down in front of Lloyd Frontera's statue and praying for his long life. He finds it very strange, but things continue to get stranger. Nevertheless, he believes there can't be anyone happier than him in this world. The people become ecstatic and excitedly announce that Master Lloyd is back. Both his parents look at him and share in his happiness. His father gazes at him, thinking their son is the strangest, while Lloyd takes out treasure boxes from his carriage.